We were also discussing Bauhaus all around, 1918, 1919, and diplomacy, the game I recall, depicts Europe right before World War I. Different empires, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire. Now you would think the world has changed, and it has, but human nature has not. And it is in this context that it's now my pleasure to introduce Marius and Sherrard of Red Hat. They're going to discuss open source approaches to fostering collaboration on applying machine learning algorithms to address worldwide challenges that ultimately reflect human nature, but whose effects impact climate, health, and the state of the world, especially with regard to political unrest, which continues. So in that context, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Marius and Sherrard of Red Hat to discuss machine learning for the greater good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This has been awesome. I haven't seen sweatpants all day, so this is really exciting. My name is Sherrard, and this is Marius, and we are going to talk about machine learning for the greater good. I currently work at Red Hat. I'm the Director of AI Services with Engineering, and Marius.
I also work for Red Hat. I'm a Chief Architect in the Financial Services team at Red Hat, focusing particularly on AI and how we help financial institutions use it.
Sorry.
So this is why I have collaboration, which is the topic of today's talk. What we're going to talk about today is kind of take a little route towards away a little bit from the algorithms and talk a little bit about a bunch of community efforts and how different institutions come together and work. We're going to talk about why they do it to build better machine learning solutions. We're going to talk about a project called OS Climate. It's actually a project called the Enterprise Neurosystem, which are reflections of this. So, without much further ado, and before handing it over to Sherrard, to talk a little bit about how this happens, why do these institutions collaborate? Like, why do they collaborate, for example, between competitors? Why do they share data when there's a lot of concern around that? They try to protect data. That's their asset. The reality is that we have problems that go beyond competition. We have problems of general interest. How do you build models, for example, for risk management that take into account the climate, which is what we're going to see next. These types of problems are both requiring a lot of data, they require a lot of effort. So on the one hand, we want to eliminate duplication. On the other hand, there is no winner if someone gets it wrong. Like the industry is in particular, these industries are very averse to the fact that someone really does something really, really bad, and it's bad for everyone. So, reducing the risks of poor data quality and duplication of efforts, and having a strong governance to address ethical concerns, I think are key pieces. And then over to Sherrard to talk a little bit about how this happens.
When you talk about solving problems that require many entities coming together, a lot of times we hear companies coming to Red Hat because we have a history of collaborating in a transparent and open way. And a lot of times when you look at what Red Hat has done, it's providing a series of things that these open source collaborative communities need. The number one thing is governance. You get a group of people together, they don't always get along. So you have to define governing strategies, you have to put together steering committees. We've done this for a long time, so we provide a lot of value and a lot of insight to help communities do that. The other thing is how to collaborate. When you're talking about not just the code, but the data, all kinds of information, it has to be done, in a transparent way, and we provide some guidance there. And then ultimately, to me, the most important part of this is, as you're collaborating, who owns what? What does the licensing look like? If I'm developing new source code, or if I'm developing new data sets, then there has to be a level setting on what happens from a licensing perspective, how is that shared, what can you do with all of that information. And so that's kind of where Red Hat comes into the fold when we're talking about communities like OS Climate, which combats climate change, and when we talk about Enterprise Neurosystem. It's important to have that experience and that grounding so that everyone understands how to operate. Next slide. I'm going to first talk to you about our open source initiative that we've been working with a lot of different institutes on, which is OS Climate. And Red Hat was brought in, and it's actually a number of different institutes that I'll talk about, but we were brought in because we wanted to look at ways in which we could build a common infrastructure to be able to help combat it. And so if you look at OS Climate, their goal is to use open source as a way to combat and do climate smart investing. First, talking about the problem a little bit. If you look at the Paris Accord, the goal of the Paris Accord is by 2030 to cut CO2 emissions by 50%. By 2050 to have a net zero, and by 2100 be net negative. In order to do that, as of today, it will take over $1 trillion per year of investment to get to that point. And if we naturally, organically let companies figure out how to do that, that's not going to happen. There's not enough investment today to push them towards closing that $1.2 trillion gap. Next slide. And so if you look at the current capital markets, one of the ways you can get them to do that is by steering where the investments go. The capital markets today represent over $100 trillion worth of investment decisions. And within those investment decisions, we have the power to either increase or decrease the CO2 emissions. We also can align or benefit from climate-aware decisions. And so you have organizations in asset management like the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, which they're growing in their portfolio. That means there's a lot of attention being paid to how do we invest in companies that will do the right thing to get us more towards that Paris Accord and decrease our CO2 emissions.